Hi class, today we are going to be covering the topic of food chains. We are going to be covering some specific content standards under the topic of ecology. If you would like to read these in further detail, please look at the lesson plan. We also have some specific instructional objectives we're trying to meet today. And today we're trying to get our students to be able to construct a food chain from a particular ecosystem and recognize the relationships that organisms have with one another. And we're going to be accomplishing this using cognitive, affective, and psychomotor skills. So before we start today, I want to propose a question to you, class. And our question is, what is a food chain? Now I want you guys to get with your partner, and you're going to have 2 minutes, and I want you to come up with some ideas of what you think a food chain is or what it consists of. Okay class, your 2 minutes is up. What kind of ideas did you guys come up with? Yeah, those are some great ideas, and you guys all got the gist of it. A food chain shows who eats who in an ecosystem. That's great. Now, we covered a lot of these terms last week, but I just wanted to brush up on them. Now, you guys remember from our last lecture that an autotroph is another word basically for a producer or a plant. They can take sunlight energy and convert it to usable energy. Now, a heterotroph, as you guys remember, is not capable of doing that. They rely on our autotrophs for their energy and raw materials. They cannot make their own energy from the sun. An herbivore was an animal that gets its energy from eating plants. An omnivore is an animal that gets its energy from eating plants or animals. A carnivore is an animal who gets its energy from eating other animals only, so it's a meat eater. And a decomposer is an organism that breaks down dead or decaying organisms. So those are our terms from last time I wanted to brush up on. But now we have some new terms that we need to learn today. Now we need to know what energy flow is. Now when we talk about energy flow, we are referring to the flow of energy in a food chain. So when something consumes or eats something, it's getting the energy from what it eats. That's the whole point of eating, is that you need fuel to keep surviving. A food chain is a linear sequence of events where basically it shows who eats who, because kind of what you guys got the gist of that in our discussion. So it shows the flow of energy. A producer is a plant, similar to an autotroph is another name for it, one of our other vocab terms, and they can use the sunlight energy and convert it to energy that is usable by other organisms. A primary consumer is an animal that eats grass and other plants. Its another name is the herbivore. So basically it's our vegetarians. They eat the plants. Secondary consumer is an animal that eats our primary consumers. So they can eat plants and animals. And tertiary consumer would be our third level. So that's a carnivore. So they're going to eat maybe our primary or secondary consumers. And then highest up in our food chain is our quaternary consumers. Now if you guys look at the picture at the bottom of our screen here, it's in the shape of a pyramid. Now at the top of the pyramid we have our quaternary consumers, and at the bottom we have our producers or our autotrophs. And the reason we have so little of our quaternary consumers is that they require more energy, so they have to eat more to survive. Now if I gave you guys these pictures, what kind of a food chain do you think we would draw? Now when we draw a food chain, we have to draw arrows between our organisms. And the arrow points to who's doing the eating, so who is getting the energy. Now in this example, our food chain would look like this. We'd start with our plant, which is our producer. The producer gets eaten by the insect. which in this case is the grasshopper. So that's our primary consumer, or our herbivore. Then the herbivore, our little insect, our grasshopper, is going to get eaten by the mouse. So that would be our secondary consumer. And then the mouse gets eaten by the owl, which is our tertiary consumer, which is a carnivore in this case. Now this food chain shows the path of energy from one living thing to another. Now we're going to do our student exploration today. I'm going to give each group poster board, markers, and crayons, and you're going to work with your partner. You guys have 15 minutes to create a food chain on this poster board from an ecosystem of your choice. I would like it if you guys drew some organisms on there. Make sure you label them. Some ecosystem ideas you can pick from are desert, ocean, pond, tundra, rainforest. But whatever ecosystem you guys decide to cover, your food chain has to show your primary energy source, aka the sun, has to show a producer, a primary consumer, a secondary consumer, a tertiary consumer, a quaternary consumer, and it has to show arrows that are showing the flow of energy. Now after 15 minutes, you guys will get to present your food chain to the class. Now if you have any questions during this time, I'm going to be walking around, and feel free to ask questions. Make sure that you guys are on the right track. Alright class, your 15 minutes is up. And you guys have already presented, and we've come up with some great food chains. We had an example of a grassland biome that started with grass and ended with a hawk. Another group did a pond, and so theirs started with algae as their producer and ended with a raccoon. And then we had another group do the ocean that had phytoplankton and ended with a white shark. And there were lots of other great ideas. So it looks like you guys got the gist of it. So in conclusion today, our main concepts are that food chains are an important part of an ecosystem, and that the organisms that live there, an organism may be affected by something that is not a part of it, its diet. So for instance, the owl can get affected by the strawberry plant if something happens to that. Another concept is that every living organism has a way it survives, either by producing its own food or by eating a certain kind of food. So I want you guys to go home and read the section of your book on food chains, and we'll go from there tomorrow. Thanks, class.